Friday's announcement was the most substantial sanctions package on Russia that we've seen, certainly in quite a few years from the Biden administration. I think what we're seeing is twofold. Firstly, these are the last days that Biden has before he hands over to President-elect Trump. And so his team is looking to take as many steps as they can to strengthen Ukraine's position and perhaps even to try and limit the scope for the Trump administration to roll back or to soften the US stance on Russia. The second is that the Biden team sees an oil market that they believe is loose enough to allow them to be tougher on Russia without too much risk of pushing oil prices higher. There will be some significant disruption to Russian flows, at least initially. We think that could be up to 1 million barrels a day of Russian crude exports that are disrupted, at least at first. I think that will feed through into higher refining margins and then into higher end product prices for consumers. But this isn't an environment where prices are anywhere near as high as they were in sort of 2022. So those price increases will be from a lower base, but they will start to be felt and they will put some upward pressure on inflation if they're sustained. I mean, this is definitely a shift in policy in the last days of the Biden administration. We've seen, and the market has got very used to, the Biden White House always prioritizing avoiding disruption to oil supplies over the other political goals of putting pressure on Russia, putting pressure on Iran. And that view seems to have shifted in the final days in office. I think maybe these are lists of targets that have been known about and identified for a while. And the sense is before they leave, this is one last go to do some of the things that they were too cautious about doing before the presidential election.
That's why we supported just and lasting peace, one that respects Ukrainian sovereignty.
I felt trust between us, and it allowed us to have a frank and constructive dialogue, Mr. President, and this trust.
It's widely known that the Trump administration maybe has differing views and tactics when it comes to Russia-Ukraine, but I think those differences are sometimes overstated. I think Trump still wants to put pressure on Russia, and he may view this sanctions package as somewhat helpful in creating leverage that he can then translate into negotiations over the course of this year. But one of the important things that has been built in here is that the sanctions have been written in such a way that that any removal or reversal of most of them would require congressional review.
You don't have a problem with Russia. We have. You don't have. You might have.
But on the diplomatic and political level, we've already seen an angry response from the Kremlin, and we may see more focus on the battlefield in Ukraine, more attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, not only to send a message to the US and the West, but also because I think President Putin is looking at a narrowing window to strengthen Russia's position on the field before he accepts that he has to move into negotiations